Almost every part of Ontario this month will host Pride celebrations of one kind or another, back in person for the first time since COVID. However, it's not without its challenges. With us now for more in Sudbury, Ontario, Caitlin Cotilla, chairperson of Fierté Sudbury Pride. In Ottawa, Ontario, Toby Whitfield, executive director of Capital Pride. And here in our studio, Deb Abdallah, president of the Pride London Festival and a social worker, and Sherwin Modeste, executive director of Pride Toronto. Welcome everyone in studio and joining us virtually. All right, I want to talk to Toby first. What is it like planning for in-person Pride events after 2 years of virtual programming? I figure the word hybrid might be used a lot, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us at the moment, it's great to be able to talk to community organizations, local businesses that we work with that set up the stages or the music. Every conversation I have is one of excitement and just really joyous to be able to think about coming back in person again and celebrating and taking up spaces in our community to be loud, be proud, and come together after what's really been a challenging couple of years for so many people.
Sherwin, I want to come to you. You were named Executive Director of Toronto Pride in the middle of a pandemic in November of 2020. Talk to me about the challenges of not only planning for Pride virtually from the onset, but now here we are going in person.
You know, for me, it is exciting. Pride has always been something that I've had a great interest in. If anyone had told me that I would be the executive director of Pride Toronto, one of Canada's largest Pride, I would have said absolutely not. But the excitement that it brings, planning our first in-person festival after 2 years, it's rewarding, it's very uplifting to be able to be part of bringing the community together to celebrate, but to also remind folks that there is still a lot of work to do within the 2S LGBTQ community.
When we talk about, say, planning for a Zoom parade or a virtual parade to an in-person, the logistics behind that, tell me a little bit behind the curtains of the challenges and obstacles there.
Oh yeah, it's completely night and day. I mean, I had the privilege of planning one virtual, which was, get the cameras rolling and things are done. Having to do with, for the past 9 months, it's a constant moving, lots of moving pieces in order to get us where we are a couple days before the festival. And it's still not smooth sailing. There is, the moving pieces has been just humongous, but also I have to say, as a result of the pandemic, one of the things that we're realizing is that it comes with its challenges, but we've also seen a huge increase in cost in order to really pull together the festival.
All right, we'll talk about costs and inflation as we hit record numbers, but I do want to talk about safety and police. While many people look forward to celebrating Pride Month, that's not the case, unfortunately, for everyone in this province. Every year, vandals across this province target queer symbols in the lead up to Pride, and this year, there were several incidences in southwestern Ontario. Between May 20th to 24th, multiple Pride flags were stolen or vandalized in the city of Norwich in Oxford County. On the screen, we have a security camera image which was submitted to CBC News showing a man removing a Pride flag from the front of an Ontario resident's home. Ontario Provincial Police said Pride flags at 3 elementary schools in the Upper Grand District School Board, that's in the Guelph area, were damaged between June 10th to June 13th. This picture here was submitted to CTV News by the OPP, shows a Pride flag cut into pieces. These are just some of the examples in a series of homophobic vandalism. Deb, I want to come to you because this is sort of in your backyard and in your neighborhood. I'm curious, how is the community feeling?
I think the community is concerned about what's happening here. We're having a lot of homophobic issues at the Thames Valley District School Board at the schools. The school has reached out, the board has reached out to me to let me know what's been going on. So they had to put some new legislation in place for that. We've had some Pride flags burned in London. So it's really concerning what's happening now because we haven't had to deal with that before in the past when we were in person at the festivals before. So this is very concerning. We're kind of concerned what's going to happen.
All right, Caitlin, I want to bring you in here. Is there any concern among LGBTQ plus organizations about homophobic incidences taking place in Pride in Sudbury?
Absolutely. And we've actually had to incorporate that into our planning this year. This is the first year in which we've had to enact a safety committee and really come up with how we're going to keep everyone safe. We've seen on social media a number of threats against, especially our youth oriented events. And so we've had to take extra precautions to make sure that, our community is safe. And it's terrifying to see, especially, we are a entirely volunteer led organization. And so what's happening is less and less people want to volunteer to put on these events when they know that their safety may be at harm.
All right, on that note, I want to bring in Toby. The relationship between Pride committees and police has been a challenging one, and it goes well into the past. How did you decide on the degree to which police would be involved in your festivities this year?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that this is a conversation that comes up sort of every year. Awkward. Our approach is being informed by community here in the capital region. It's a position that we took in 2017, and we haven't changed since. It was a request that was made following community consultations that folks that were interested from the police in participating in the parade do so without their uniforms, without weapons, without police vehicles, and those sorts of things. And really, at the time, it was a request also for the police to involve themselves in the community, to listen to the calls for reform and for change, and to really reflect on those things, rather than focusing on what they're wearing in the parade, to try to encourage policing institutions to have a conversation about how they could reform and be more responsive to the community. So, since 2017, our positions remained unchanged. I don't think it's necessary to really review it at this point. And what we're focused on is, the more than 200 other groups that are in the parade, making sure everyone, as an entire parade contingent, has a great time in the festival.
Sherwin, I want to get your take as well. I'm hoping to get everyone's take on this question. But Sherwin, like Toby said, this is a conversation that happens every year, and I imagine this is no different. How did you guys sort of decide how police would be involved this year?
No, and thank you. And again, like Toby, Pride Toronto membership made a decision. The decision was made in 2016. The decision stands. The only person or groups that can change that would be at a membership meeting. So again, and I think it's really important that we understand the intent of the motion and understand that there are still community members, our trans women, especially trans women of color, continues to be terrified by law enforcement. We have our young queer folks. We have our homeless folks that are continued. So again, it's more than just about marching in the parade, but as Toby said, it's the dialogue that needs to happen on how we're going to address the ongoing issues between the relationship between police and the queer community. And this is not going to change with them coming and march in the parade. This is going to change because there is some attitude and behaviors that needs to change from their end.
Deb, I'll get your take as well.
Yes.
To what degree?
So in 2011, I'm the one that brought the police into Pride London for the first time, into the parade and everything. So a lot has happened since then. The police are going to be in the parade this year, but as Toby said, they're not going to have uniforms on or weapons or anything like that. I'm on a diversity committee in London, which I brought the diversity police officer into that committee because this is a learning thing here, right? As Sherwin was saying, we want to see change, and the police are working very closely with me to help make that change. The community has to see that change, right? We don't have as much incidents as they do in Toronto happening, but we do still have incidents happening, and some people have just recently reported something to me, and I reported it to the police right away, and they handled it properly. So this is what we want to see. We want to see people, it doesn't matter if this is this community or any other community, we want to see people treated with respect and dignity when they're dealing with the police.
All right, Caitlin, I'll get your take. What was sort of the planning and thinking behind sort of to what degree police would be involved?
Absolutely. For us, this was actually a very easy decision. Honoring the fact that Pride started in response to police brutality and in response to the over-policing of marginalized bodies. We don't want police necessarily in uniform at Pride. We recognize that there's a lot of deep-seated trauma within our community that, is going to make it feel unsafe, even if the police in our community aren't doing things at the moment that are unsafe for queer folks. There's still that trauma there. And we want to make sure that we are honoring our community first and foremost. And so what we've said is that, if they want to come as individuals and support and be allies on an individual level, they are more than welcome to come. They can't wear their uniform. But you know what? Show up as an individual. But as an institution, as policing, we don't want that in our communities because we know that it's going to make people feel unsafe and not want to attend. And that's the last thing we want to do is isolate already, isolated communities and members of our community.
All right.
Maybe I can pick up on something on this
Yeah.
quickly, because what I worry is that the discussion about whether or not police are marching in a parade, it actually to me feels like a bit of a distraction.
Yeah.
What 2S LGBTQ2 plus communities across the province, across the country are calling for are real changes in the way that police interact with communities. And it's not just 2S LGBTQ2 plus communities, it's the intersections of Indigenous communities, racialized communities. And this actually, for me, serves as a distraction. We spend more time talking about what someone's wearing in the parade than talking about, are we going to spend and redirect the increasing budgets year after year from the police to frontline community services who are providing really important mental health support, homeless support for folks that are without housing, folks that are facing issues with accessing food security. Instead, we spend a disproportionate amount of time talking about what someone's going to wear to the parade. And I would just, take the opportunity to say what we need to talk about is system-wide reform and addressing the bigger picture, not how one group is going to participate in a parade of, in Ottawa, over 200 groups are participating. But we spend such a large amount of time talking about how this one group is participating when community's been clear for us since 2017. And we haven't seen the change that people are calling for here in that time.
Okay.
Good point there. I want to change gears a little bit. Sherwin, you talked a little bit about the money. Everyone is feeling it across this country. Our pockets feel a lot lighter, and I'm curious, as organizers, how have you guys grappled with inflation? Have you experienced the financial strain when organizing Pride events this year?
Yes, no, again, thank you. This year we have seen a huge increase in the cost of goods and services that Pride has never seen before. We're talking at least, in some cases, up to 40% increase in acquiring goods and services. We're very grateful that our corporate sponsors continue to be very present and continue to support, because I can tell you, the work of Pride and the activities of Pride for us and for most of the Prides in Canada, it is free. So there is no money to be made by these things, the activities that we put on. So having the corporate sponsorship, having government back and support the work that we do is very important. But coming out of COVID, we have definitely seen a huge increase in the cost of goods and services.
All right, let's go to Southwestern Ontario and London. How has that financial strain been felt?
It's been a hard time we didn't start planning for our festival until February because we weren't sure we were going to be in person. So we had to kind of try to do everything in a couple of months, and the costs have been really, really high. Security, everything. Just so you know, I just want to go touch back on the parade for a minute with the police, because in order for us to have that Pride parade in London, we have to hire 26 police officers in uniform at the closed streets to be able to have the parade. So that's a huge cost that wasn't donated to us. Yes. Yeah, so security, everything is, even the tent rentals, everything has gone up like twice the price it was before.
Is there anything that you've had to eliminate in years previous that would have normally been there because the costs have been too high?
No, I've tried not to eliminate everything. I'm trying to count my pennies and everything, so to speak, to make sure that the community has, because it's been 2 years, to make sure the community has what they had before.
All right, Toby, I want to come to you talking about numbers. Are you expecting that fewer or more people will be participating in Pride this year? There's a lot. 2 years of being sort of held up in people's homes. There's a lot of things happening when we talk about discrimination towards the LGBTQ plus community. If we look south of the border, there's a lot of reasons for people to come out. But I'm curious, where do you expect those numbers to go?
I mean, I think we'll see some of our largest events and programming, and certainly the largest parade that we've ever had in the nation's capital. And I think what I'm hearing from community organizations and folks across the region are people are really excited to come together. I think we're going to see a huge outpouring of support from the local community. And I think we'll see tourism sort of maybe more local, so within a driving distance of Ottawa, maybe rather than people traveling further afield. But I think that we're going to see really big crowds at our events, at the parade, at our stages and other activities throughout the week.
Sherwin, you got the biggest parade and
You
biggest
do.
organization here. What are we thinking about numbers this year?
100%. We are expecting, in fact, the numbers that we're looking at, it definitely will be one of the largest Pride festivals that Toronto have seen. We're currently at over 300 contingents marching with over 35,000 individual marchers. So our pre-pandemic numbers was around 1.7 million attendees, and we're expecting that to be the same or even higher. Again, we have the privilege of being able to bring in some international artists, which has definitely attracted some international guests. So we're also expecting a huge number of individuals from overseas. You cannot get a hotel in the city of Toronto as we speak. So it speaks to not just the protest of Pride, not just the celebration of Pride, but it also speaks to the economic impact that prides across Ontario have on their local economy.
Caitlin, I want to come to you. Your organization is a lot smaller when we compare it to Ottawa or Toronto, but there's some important planning that goes into sort of the events that you put in place. I'm hoping you can walk me through sort of why it's important that you guys don't plan and overlap with, say, events in Pride Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually are in a really unique situation in that we don't host our Pride Week during June, which is considered Pride Month. We actually host our Pride Week in July. It's July 11th to the 17th, and it's been in July for the past 25 years. This is our 25th anniversary, and we have been doing it all since then. And part of that reason is simply because we recognize that people in our community want to go out into the province, go to these bigger cities, and meet people from all across the province, right? We are a smaller community, and oftentimes we think we know everybody in our own community. And so it gives us that chance to get to know these other people and get new life experiences. And so we don't want to tread on that. We want to support other communities. And often what we try to do this year is a little bit different because of how high the gas prices are. It's harder for us to support some of these prides. But usually we like to bring our team down. We go to Toronto Pride together. We go to North Bay Pride. We go to all these different prides and support because we think when one pride is thriving, all of us can thrive.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Great point. Toby, I want to come to you. Sherwin had talked about sort of corporate involvement, and I feel there's a sort of a running joke in the community. When Pride Month arrives, companies start to roll out the rainbows, and we call this pink washing. How sincere they are in supporting the LGBTQ plus community is one question, but corporate involvement in Pride has always been sort of contentious. And I'm curious, how are you deciding who to take sponsorships from?
I think that's a good question. I think this year there's the context Sherwin spoke to about the challenges that Pride organizations are facing with increasing costs of everything at the moment is an important context for this year. But I think more broadly, our approach is really to partner with organizations that are doing important good work year-round. We do know that some folks will roll out a marketing campaign for the month of June. I think that's important. I think it serves an important purpose. But we're really looking forward to partnering with groups that are trying to maybe engage in their local community outside of June, or engage their employees with an employee resource group, or perhaps bring guest speakers in throughout the year. And certainly I've noticed in the last few years of working with different companies and organizations here that there is an interest in doing this kind of work 365 days a year. I think maybe in response to calls from community to go beyond just a partnership during Pride, companies are saying, how do we engage the communities we work with? How do we engage our employees year round? So it is building more inclusive workplaces and more inclusive communities. And so what we do is when someone contacts us and they want to be involved in Capital Pride, we do have a statement and a commitment of principles and equity that we ask folks to sign on to. And we have those conversations. What are you doing beyond just being in the parade to engage your employees, engage your business, your customers, and all of those types of opportunities?
All right, I want to get the takes of the two smaller sort of urban centers. I see, Caitlin, you're agreeing there. To walk me through sort of that process in terms of how you're taking sponsorships.
Yeah, absolutely. So being located in Northern Ontario, we have a lot less access to resources in compared to some of these other larger urban areas. And so we really struggle to finance our Pride. And, we are an entirely volunteer-led organization because we can't afford to pay a staff member. And so we have to constantly be asking for money, and we don't have grant funding available to us necessarily that is dedicated to some of these, larger expenses. And so we have to really rely on these corporate sponsorships to get us through the year. And what we've had to do is sit down and say, what is the line in the sand we absolutely will not cross? And kind of go from there. So a great example is, we don't want to take money from a bank that is investing in oil, or a corporation that's actively investing in campaigns that are anti-LGBTQ+, right? That's our line in the sand, and we won't take money from police. And we won't cross those lines, but otherwise it has to be a case-by-case basis, because if every year we're fighting for that funding, we want to make sure we can put on this event. And so it's been hard, and sometimes we've had to make some morally gray choices to make sure that we're still able to offer this to our community.
Deb, I want to get your take on that.
Yes, so in London, we're a volunteer board also. We can't afford an EA, or ED, I should say. So we have to send out sponsorship letters to the community all the time asking for help to put on this Pride. And we're still doing that, actually, and we're like a month out from our festival. So one concern we have, and I know we're working with at least one of our corporate sponsors that really, we're really questionable whether they're in this for the right reason, because they think that we should have money to support this festival without relying on corporate sponsors. And that's not the way this is. This is a nonprofit organization, and we can't put this festival on without getting sponsorships and donations from corporations and businesses in the community. So that's a big issue for us. And that's rainbow washing right there.
There you go. Sharon, I'll get your take on there as well.
No, so again, I want to say for the record that Pride Toronto, annually, we turn down thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars from large corporations who do not fit within the mandate of Pride Toronto. So we actually have a sponsorship deck that goes out, and there's an application process to become a sponsor in Pride. And if you do not demonstrate that you are committed, not just for Pride Month, but for year-round, because you can't come and give us money but you're not offering same-sex benefits, and those pieces. So for us, those things are really, really important. And again, we might differ in Toronto from a Pride up north, but ultimately, I think the vision of making sure that we're accepting what we will call clean money is very important.
All right, I want to bring up a point. We talked about corporate sponsors, which is obviously a big chunk of money, but grants also play a big one. And there's a bit of a storyline here with Pride Toronto. You were not we should clarify, you were not the executive director at the time. So, but these allegations, independent audit by accounting firm KPMG found that Pride Toronto failed to meet the conditions of 3 federal government grants totaling almost $2 million. There were other allegations that Pride Toronto also falsified documents, exploited Indigenous and Two-Spirit artists in the past. I'm curious, now that you are at the helm, how are you and your team working to rebuild and improve Pride Toronto, not just its image, but more importantly, the relationships there?
No, and again, from the get-go, when I walked into Pride Toronto, realized, okay, and this is on the record, that there were some things that were just not adding up. And this is why we went to KPMG and said, can you come in? Can you help us to understand where we went wrong? And Pride Toronto has accepted all of the recommendations that KPMG presented. And I'm happy to say that of all the recommendations, almost 90% of them were already in place even before the recommendations. So we identified where the gaps were prior. We have a new board of directors, you have a new ED that was really focused on governance. And in relation to relationship building, it is an ongoing piece that we have to do, building relationship not just with the Indigenous community, but also with the general community who have been left out, BIPOC folks who felt they have been left out of Pride Toronto. So a lot of the policies and procedures that we're putting in place will ensure falsifying of documents, that grants that was meant for A is no longer going to be. And if folks check our website, they will now be able to see these are the grants we applied for, these are the ones we receive, and here are the reports to prove that we have done the work that we said we were going to be doing.
All right. Caitlin, I want to come to you. Obviously, Northern Ontario. When we talk about Indigenous engagement, what does that look like this year for Sudbury Pride?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've run into a lot of challenges when it comes to engaging many of the marginalized communities here in Sudbury, because COVID burnout is a real thing. And it's something that, because we don't have access to the same resources as some of these larger Pride organizations, paying people is not the same level of pay that you would get in some of these larger cities. And so we've had to be very creative and work with a lot of these organizations that are already doing this work. One thing we noticed when we started planning this year is that a lot of these organizations that are doing work in Sudbury, we've all been working in silos. So we've all been doing our own things and stepping on each other's toes. And this year, we really wanted to revamp the way that we went forward as an organization. It's our 25th anniversary, and our idea was, we're going to look back and honor the past 25 years, but create a better future for the next 25 years. And so part of that was making sure that we're building those relationships and working alongside these communities and these organizations doing that work already. So rather than imposing or trying to step on people's toes, we're all working together as a community. Because at the end of the day, that's the goal, is for us to come together and work together as a community and do something for our community.
Toby, Caitlin had mentioned earlier sort of the revolutionary roots of Pride and how it came to be. And some critics have accused Pride of straying away from that. From an organizer's perspective, are you hoping to mobilize the queer community to demonstrate against discrimination, or is this to bring everyone for a much overdue party? I know it's probably both, but is there a balance there that you're trying to strike?
Yeah, I think it definitely is both, right? I think reflecting here, we try and celebrate both. I think the parade is a huge celebratory opportunity, but it's also an opportunity for many local organizations to create a platform, to have a platform to bring forward messages that are important to them or that they're working on as a community. But I'll just say, we just wrapped up a provincial election here in Ontario, and many Pride organizations and other frontline to us LGBTQ2+ groups came together to have a provincial-wide advocacy campaign around securing more funding for frontline services, for securing better gender-affirming healthcare options for community. So I think it will always be both. I don't think for us we choose one or the other. I think we think about our advocacy work when we're choosing speakers and performers, and when we're working with different community groups here to make sure that there is that balance. And I think we're lucky to have so many great other organizations in the city and in the region that are also involved in a variety of different advocacy campaigns, and we try to use our platforms to also amplify their messages too.
Deborah, I'm hoping to get your take on that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I took over in November of last year, one of the issues is there was a divide amongst our community with Pride London, especially the trans community, because they weren't treated very well by the board or the president that was back in 2019. So I'm working really hard to mend those fences and bring this community back together, because I think it's really important. So like I mentioned, I'm on a diversity committee with some of the agencies in London, and we talk about employment and we talk about housing for LGBTQ, and that's really important. And advocacy for this community is really, really important. So one thing we were talking about, the financial. So record keeping is a really big thing. I know Sherwin walked into something, and so I've walked into something too, obviously, because I didn't get records from a couple years ago, and that's really concerning. So I'm putting all new policies in place with Pride London, and making sure that there's a paper trail for everything, right? And in fact, you're talking about grants with the Pride Toronto recently. So I got an email recently from one of the grants. I won't mention who it is, but they wanted a report from 2019, and I don't have the records for it. So here we go. So I want to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore, that everything is recorded properly. We're transparent. We have reports for everything. I have all the bank statements, and I want to make sure everything's transparent so the community can see everything.
All right, we have about less than a minute left. Sherwin, you got the last question. What are your hopes for the future of Pride, not only here in Toronto, but in Ontario?
My hopes for Prides, and again, I will take it even one step further across the world, is to see my queer siblings, no matter where, whether they're in Africa, the Caribbean, Asia, Australia, to be able to be their authentic self and celebrate, so that we can get rid of the protests and we can be a celebration to our community.
Deb, Sherwin, Caitlin, Toby, I want to thank you so much. I know it's going to be a very, very busy days and weeks as we go into July as well. I know I will be having a drink at behind the 519, so it will be a splendid time. But thank you so much for your insights and your perspectives.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and
Thank
happy
you.
Pride.
Thank you. Happy Pride.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.